A calculator trick you can use is just to type that into your calculator using your fraction button. So 54 minus, oops, wrong button, hit the fraction button, 225 over 4, enter, so negative 9/4. So minus 9/4. Now, normally we would just write minus 9/4 instead of plus negative 9/4, but if the number is negative, then you would put the negative in the box. So in the box here we'll have 15 over 2, and then negative 9/4. In Khan Academy, you can just use the slash symbol for division or for a fraction bar. All right, so that's an example where the leading coefficient is 1. Now, what if it's not 1? So here's our next example, that's similar to this one. So let's say h of x is equal to 2x squared plus 11x plus 15. And the answer setup is the same as example number 1. So there's a box for the number that you factor out, and then times x plus another box, the number that completes the square, and then plus another box, the answer that you get outside of the parentheses. In vertex form, this would be this would be h and k, and this would be your k, like the y-coordinate of the vertex. So the first step here would be to factor out the leading coefficient. In this case would be 2. So the 2 is actually going to be what's in the first box. So now you're only going to factor it out from these two terms. So let me show you. So factor out 2, and then you'll have x squared plus. Now, if you factor out a 2 from 11, you'd think what number when multiplied by 2 is equal to 11? It would be 5.5, or you can write 11/2. And then plus blank, and then leave the 15 on the outside. We're not going to factor out 2 from 15 because it's not going to go in the parentheses with the perfect square trinomial. All right, so then you would figure out what goes here by taking your b divided by 2 and square it. So if you take 11/2 divided by 2, you get 11/4. And then if you square 11/4, you get 121 over 16. So that's the number that goes here. Now, if you watch my other video from last week, I explained how if you take 2, or if you add 121 over 16 here, it's actually being multiplied by 2. So we wouldn't add 121 over 16 or subtract 121 over 16 to 15. So instead, to figure that out, you take 2, multiply it by 121 over 16. So 2 over 1 times 121 over 16 would be 2 and 16, simplify to 1 and 8. So this would be 121 over 8. So that is actually what you're going to subtract from 15. All right. So then we can complete the square. We can write this perfect square trinomial as a perfect square. So the 2 out in front, and then x plus, and remember the number that goes here is the number that you got before you squared, which would be 11/4. So 11/4 squared, and then plus, let's figure out what 15 minus 121 over 8 is using the same calculator trick as number 1. So 15 minus 121 over 8 gives us negative 1/8. So negative 1/8. All right, so what goes in the box then? The 2 goes in the first box, 11/4 goes in the second box, and negative 1/8 goes in the third box. So if you're a little bit worried about this concept, don't worry. This is the trickiest concept that we will cover from here on out. So if you can get past this, then the rest of it will be a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to do one more example, based on the examples that are in Khan Academy. So this third one, and these are all examples that are on Khan Academy, so maybe you'll get lucky and you'll get the same one that I'm showing here. So here's the third kind of example, is if you have an equation like 4x squared plus 8x plus 3, and it's equal to 0. So basically you're finding the solutions, but you're just writing it in vertex form. So the answer format is x plus blank squared equals blank. So they want you to put a blank here and a blank there. So they basically want you to complete the square and figure out what goes on this side. So if it's like this, then the first step would be to move the c term, move the constant term over to the other side. So I'm going to do that. 4x squared plus 8x, and then I'm going to leave some space here, equals -3. Alright, so then the second step, if your leading coefficient is not 1, then you would factor it out normally, but here there's not a blank in front of the parentheses, so that means you're going to divide everything by 4. So let's divide everything by 4, even the -3. You probably could have done that back at the beginning if you wanted to. Alright, so then the resulting equation is x squared plus 2x, and I'm leaving a blank here, equals -3/4. Alright, so then let's figure out what number we need to complete the square. So we take our b, divide it by 2, that gives us 1, and then we square that number. 1 squared is just 1. So if we add 1 over here, then whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side. So also add 1 to -3/4. Now the reason why we subtracted in the other two examples was because the numbers were on the same side of the equation. Like here we subtracted. So if they're on the same side, then you would subtract. If they're on opposite sides, then whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side. Alright, and then we will rewrite this as a perfect square. So x plus, and then a 1 would go in the blank. -3/4 plus 1 is 1/4. So then the first blank would be 1, and the second blank would be positive 1/4. So I hope that this video helps you on these assignments, and good luck. Let me know if you have any other questions.